You're listening to the Today's Wills and Probate podcast, one of the leading sources of information for the wills and probate sector. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todayswillsandprobate.co.uk and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Wills and Probate podcast. Today, I have two guests with me, Lucinda Frostick, Director at Remember a Charity, and Chris Millward, Head of Legacies at Princess Alice Hospice, to talk about the work of Remember a Charity and also some recent research that has been conducted as well. It's great to have you both on the podcast, and thank you very much indeed for joining. Chris, I'm going to come to you first. At the start of these discussions, I always find it useful just to do a very short introduction to who we've got on. So if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your role, please, at Princess Alice Hospice.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Chris Millward. As you've already said, I'm Head of Legacies here at Princess Alice Hospice. I have been a legacy fundraiser for nearly 20 years now. So I've seen the legacy sector from lots of different perspectives and worked for lots of amazing organisations along the way. But I am now here at Princess Alice Hospice. We have a care area of about 1 million people across southwest London, Surrey and Middlesex. And at any one time, we're caring for about 1,000 people, either in their homes, within care homes, or here at the hospice.
Super, thanks, Chris. Lucinda, if you wouldn't mind doing the same, please.
Hi, David. Thank you for having us on today's podcast. It's really great to be here. I'm Lucinda Frostick. I'm Director at Remember a Charity. For those of you that aren't familiar with Remember a Charity, we're a consortium of about 200 charities working collaboratively here in the UK to grow the charitable legacy market. Essentially, we help charities and community-based organisations to develop this really vital and long-term income stream. On a personal note, I've been with the organisation just over 2 years. It's really flown by. I'm privileged to work with a very small but hugely engaged and enthused team who are all committed, like me, to see what we can do to build and grow the legacy market. This is just such a crucial form of income for charities in the UK currently, and of course for all of us who rely on charities for their services across the UK.
Forgive me because I forget what the exact number is, but yes, legacies contribute a massive amounts of money towards the charity sector, and I'm actually very proud to say that Today's Wills and Probate has been a long-standing supporter of Remember a Charity as well. And you've given us a little bit of the background to it, but perhaps some of the ambitions and headline statistics around Remember a Charity, please, Lucinda.
Sure, absolutely. As a behaviour change campaign, we do have really big aspirations here at Remember a Charity. And the reason that we have big aspirations for growing legacy giving is simply because there is so much appetite there. We're in an incredibly fortunate position here in the UK where I think the wider legacy giving environment is really very positive. There are some great tax incentives available for those who choose to leave gifts in their will. And it's getting more and more understood day by day that a charitable legacy is something that any one of us within reason can write into our will. It doesn't have to be a particularly large gift. It can include absolutely any charity or many charities, and it's an incredibly meaningful way of giving. So when you ask about our ambition, I mean, we're currently at the place now where, having worked for about 20 years in this space, to normalise this form of giving and to accelerate growth by working closely with partners such as yourselves and others within the legal space. We're now at a place where our consumer benchmarking tracking studies show us that around 20%, so around 1 in 5 of charity supporters aged 40 plus now include a gift to charity in their will, which is wonderful and a huge uplift on where it was a few years ago. But the truth is that twice as many people say they would be happy to leave a gift in their will. So if we could close that gap between intention and action, I think that could be phenomenal. It could be transformative for so many organisations, but it's also about helping people find the joy of giving, helping them achieve their charitable intentions and of course helping charities secure that longer term income, which has been so crucial, as we've seen in recent years through the pandemic and so on, in building resilience and funding services that will ensure our society really for generations to come. But to do that, we can't do that alone. We need to work collaboratively, and that's why we are this collaborative collective campaign of about 200 charities. And that's why we work with partners ranging from those across the legal sector to government to ensure that we really can build and nurture that wider will writing environment, and that the legal sector plays such a key role within that.
Really important to note that Remember a Charity is open to both the regulated community as well as the unregulated community, isn't it?
That's right. So Remember a Charity has 3 key areas of our work. So we deliver high profile consumer campaigns, which run all year round and really sort of build up to a peak in Remember a Charity Week, which takes place in September. We can come on to that again later. In terms of our work with the legal sector, you're absolutely right. So we run a campaign supporter scheme, which currently includes about 900 solicitor firms across the UK and will writers. In terms of eligibility, we ask for solicitors who are regulated, but also organisations who might be signed up through Best Foundation and Institute of Professional Will Writers. So they can all participate in our campaign supporter scheme. And our campaign supporter scheme, essentially, all we do is we ask our campaign supporters to commit to make their clients aware of the option of leaving a gift to charity in their will during the will writing process. And in doing so, we then in return provide a whole range of free resources. We have a solicitor and will writer listing directory on our website, which is open to the public. Being a sort of digitally centred campaign, we have about 300,000 consumers coming to our website looking for information about charitable will writing each year. We feature campaign supporters, so those are the solicitors and professional will writers who are including the charitable option on our solicitor directory, and we're finding that more and more people are coming to that area of the website. So it's a really great way for solicitors and professional will writers to increase their profile with people who are actively looking to write or update their wills.
Chris, you can't overstate the importance of legacies to charities, can you? I mean, you've got some sizable expenditure with your infrastructure, no doubt.
Oh, no, absolutely. So, it costs us about £10 million a year to run the hospice. And every year we start from zero. We get about 20% grant funding from the NHS, but the rest is voluntary donations. And although it varies, on average, it's about 1/3 of our annual income that comes from gifts in wills. We had quite an exceptional year last year and raised 5.2 million of the 10.1 that we raised. So we are, eternally grateful. We could not do what we do without the generosity of those who have chosen to support us in this way. But as Lucinda says, I guess there's that kind of intention gap. We know that lots of other people might want to support in a similar way, and I guess my role is to help people to understand that it is an option, and if they choose to take that, to support them in going down that route. One of the ways in which charities do that obviously is working with solicitors and other professional advisors to support people on that journey, to make sure that they can have a quality up-to-date will written, and that their final wishes, as they hope they will be, are carried through when they die.
Have we got any insight into what the blockers are between that gap between those that want to give and those that do give?
It's one of the questions that we ask in our consumer benchmarking report, but interestingly, we also ask it in our professional advisor benchmarking study. So I can answer that from 2 different perspectives. When we ask solicitors and professional will writers what they think are the barriers that might prevent people from leaving a gift in their will, typically they will say they think their clients want to leave everything to their family. Their clients have a really clear idea of who they feel should benefit from their will already. And they also often raise the issue around perhaps if they leave a gift in their will, it might lead to dispute within the family. What's really interesting, though, is when we ask the same question in our consumer tracking studies, we don't get quite the same response. Yes, certainly, for a lot of people, they just want their inheritance to go purely to their loved ones. But actually, the issue around dispute with their loved ones doesn't come up very often at all when we're speaking to the public. Actually, there's this real sense that they feel a sense of pride that they're leaving a gift to charity, and they know that that's something their family would support. Usually people who choose to leave a gift in their will have also supported charities in their lifetime. It's part of who they are. It's what they want to do and absolutely the right thing for them at the end of their days. But interestingly, one of the key things that crops up is simply it just didn't occur to them at the point where they were writing their will. And so that, I think, is what highlights just how important the role of solicitors and professional will writers is here, because simply by highlighting the option, we know from our studies with the behavioural insights team many years ago that doubles the chances that a client will go ahead and do so. And we're seeing that finding is being echoed when we ask consumers themselves to identify why it is that they didn't leave a gift to charity in their will. Really interesting.
From a charity perspective, it is very much about making sure people know it's an option. Sometimes I think it's conspicuously absent. It's not part of a charity's ongoing communications. And so when the ask does come, it sometimes feels like quite an exceptional thing. I think we talked a lot about normalising legacy conversations across communications so that our supporters know it is an important way in which we are funded, and that when the time is right for them, it's a decision that they can kind of take and move forward in the way that they want to.
We've just done a podcast around the spend that charities do on legacy gifting. And that's a really difficult line to walk, isn't it, Chris? Because you can imagine being somebody that might donate to a charity. You want all of your funding to go into the work of that charity, whereas actually the reality is there's a cost to chasing charity legacy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a kind of ongoing debate in the sector, to be honest, about the kind of investment in costs, in fundraising, in overhead, in governance. But I think you're right, David. We do need to spend that money in order to run our organisations effectively, and to raise the money that we need to keep us kind of running. We try, as any charity would, to keep those costs to a minimum, but I do think there's an argument to be made for investment, and we've certainly seen investment in legacies going up over recent years. More and more charities are getting involved. I wouldn't say there's a magic formula there. I think sometimes it's not so much an investment of money in terms of direct spend. It's often an investment of time to build internal engagements, to raise awareness, to reach out to supporters. And I think you can do a lot with a relatively small amount of money if the culture and the ways of working are supportive of it.
And I think we are in a very fortunate position in many ways with the legacies, that it is an incredibly cost-effective area of fundraising. And ultimately, when you choose to leave a gift in your will, it's something you think about quite deeply. So actually, it's not necessarily driven by that sort of final ask. Sure enough, you need to know that the charity needs a legacy, and that somewhere at some point you'll likely have seen the impact of gifts in wills on that organisation, or at least can have an understanding of what it might mean to them. But actually, really, it's about your inherent trust, confidence and belief that that organisation aligns with your values, and that organisation is an organisation that you want to be remembered for supporting, and that organisation is going to continue to provide a key role long into the future. And I think when we think about legacy giving, it's very different from sponsoring a friend or even signing up for a regular gift. It is something we think about at a very deep level. But the point about investment is an interesting one, because it very much ties into the history of Remember a Charity. So Remember a Charity was actually set up more than 20 years ago, when a handful of fundraising directors at charities came together and they recognised that something really quite remarkable was happening. They could see that more and more people were choosing to leave gifts in their wills, but it wasn't really something that anyone felt comfortable talking about. And really, was it going to be appropriate to have these conversations with supporters? There was nervousness about how they approach it. So they came together and created Remember a Charity, or what was then the Legacy Promotion Campaign. It's a wonderful example of what can happen when charities come together and go, this isn't an area we want to compete. We want to see if we can work together to grow this and create an income stream that will not only provide people with a very special way of seeing their philanthropic goals met, but help charities work more efficiently and more effectively to budget for sort of longer term spend and to battle through all the highs and lows that are likely to come. That forward thinking action by a handful of charities really has driven a huge amount of growth in this space. I'm not saying that Remember a Charity is responsible exclusively for the growth that we've seen in Legacies. It is very much a collective effort. But what we can see now is a much more confident sector. It is very much a norm to see that charities are talking with their supporters about the option of leaving a gift in their will. And without that conversation, without that understanding about the impact of gifts in wills, I think the income that charities currently can rely on and will be able to rely on over the coming generations really would be very different.
You've referenced your will writing trends reports that you've published, and they're both relatively freshly published as well. And we've talked about some of the information that's come out of those. What are the other kind of key things that you're taking away from that work?
When it comes to trends amongst professional advisors and their approach to legacy giving, the picture really is quite encouraging. What we're seeing is sort of a slow, steady growth in the proportion of solicitors and professional will writers who are comfortable raising the charitable option with their clients. Around about 3 in 4 now say they always or sometimes reference that option with their clients, which is, as we mentioned before, hugely important because that reference can be the difference between somebody deciding to leave a gift or not. They just they need to know that it needs to be front of mind. They need to be thinking about it at the point of writing a will. So that's really encouraging to see. On the back of that, we're seeing around 1 in 5 professionally written wills, now including a charitable bequest. And what's also interesting is around about 90% of the solicitors we spoke to in our latest benchmarking study saying that they'd administered charitable estates in the past year. So we're seeing more discussion about charitable wills. We're seeing more people choosing to leave gifts to charity in their wills, and we're also seeing more solicitors and will writers involved in that administration process. The other thing that's quite interesting is that we are seeing greater breadth in terms of the number of charities that are included in wills, and I think we're seeing better understanding amongst the public that they can take this action, that they can choose to leave a gift in the will.
Certainly my understanding of legacy gifting is that greater breadth point that you've made is increasingly important in this sector. A lot of local charities are the beneficiaries of legacies.
Small and local charities are increasingly benefiting from gifts in wills. And I think there's still a myth that hangs over the charitable legacy market, which is that this is one for the big boys. This is something that, big charities benefit from, and perhaps even only people leaving a large amount of money might choose, the path that they might choose to take. But increasingly, we're seeing more breadth. We're seeing more smaller and local community-based charities benefiting. And for those organisations, it really can be utterly transformative. Actually, I spoke with a youth action trust not so long ago who shared an amazing story, which I think is so powerful. They were on the brink of closure, hadn't anticipated a legacy, a charitable legacy landed with them. I think it was around £100,000. And so they went from being on that brink of closure to being able to not only continue their services for those in their local area, but to actually upscale the work that they do. So that is the difference that a legacy can make. Now, obviously, most legacies are considerably smaller than that, but collectively, each and every one of those legacies are hugely valued and can make a massive difference.
Makes life quite challenging for you though as well, Chris, presumably, because like you say, you're trying to raise £10 million every year and you start from zero every time.
We do indeed. And I think just to put it in context, we've seen some quite disturbing news recently about hospices who are in financial trouble, and hospices have closed as a result of the kind of funding gaps that they've seen. I mean, our own reality is that although we are relatively stable at the moment financially, we know that we are only reaching about a third of the population that we would want to in terms of the provision of our service. So 2/3 is going unserved. So as much as we're raising £10 million a year and doing all that great work, there is still so much more that we need to do, and we're entering a kind of strategic review process at the moment to work out how we can start to meet that unmet need, what the service provision will look like as a result of it, and therefore how much money we're going to have to raise. Now, hospices are oft local, much loved charities. We held a couple of events recently, and Meet the Chief Exec and an open garden, and we got to talk to some of our pledgers and other supporters. And it is that direct contact, that first-hand experience. They know who we are, they know what we do, they've seen it directly. Some people remarkably supported us for 40 years, got involved in the original appeal that set up the hospice, but they'd never been here. Yet they committed to leaving a gift in the will because they just believe in the work that we do. We are a local charity, we support local people. That is where the benefit is seen, and the mainstay of our support comes from those local people.
I know you've got some information about number of wills that are being written and the age at which they're being written as well from your study that I think is probably worth diving into, Lucinda.
Our consumer benchmarking study looks at legacy giving behaviours and attitudes for charity supporters age 40 plus. And if you think about that demographic, it's probably the ideal will writing audience, really. But what's really interesting within that sort of data set is we do dig into quite a lot of information around will writing trends. And what we can see, at least for the last few years post-pandemic, is that will writing itself is slowly, steadily on the increase. And when I say slowly, steadily, I don't know if there's a huge amount we can read into this, because it is an incremental rise. So it's one we'll continue to watch. But we've seen will writing go up from 62% 2 years ago to 63% of the population we asked to 64% this year. So it appears to be climbing. And of those with a will, around 1 in 3 of those have included a charitable gift, up from about 29% in 2022. So again, we're seeing a slight increase there, which is hugely positive. The interesting thing from a will writer's perspective is about 50% of those with wills say they haven't actually changed, they've never changed their will. And most of them think those wills are up to date. So perhaps there's a bit of work to be done there. But you asked about ages, and I think there's a really interesting point to be made here, because when we talk about legacy giving, we often think about people are towards the end of their lifetime, the baby boomers, the older age groups. And certainly you're going to see greater legacy giving prevalence amongst that sort of age group because, of course, they're more likely to have a will. But when you look at those with wills in place, actually legacy giving is most prevalent for those in their 40s and 50s. So it's quite interesting to think about what that might mean for the future of legacy giving. And also perhaps from a will writer's perspective, recognizing that values, beliefs, giving is really important to those younger age groups. So perhaps that's also a really good way for them to approach the subject of will writing. So rather than seeing it as being a sort of an add-on within the will writing process, recognizing that actually reaching out to charity supporters, they're more likely to be engaged and want to write their wills, and a thriving potential client base.
And Chris, we've talked in the context of the discussion about normalising legacy gifting. Is that something that you're starting to see now within a charity? Which part of the curve are we on? Are we still on the upward part of the curve? Have we reached the top of it, on our way down?
I think it's probably a slightly more rocky road than that, David. I've inherited a program that's been running for many years. Princess Alice was one of the first hospices to engage with legacy giving. Our current chief executive is a great advocate of legacy gifts. I think it fluctuates, to be honest. I think the challenge is consistency over time, and through staff changes and changes in priorities, legacies can get a bit buffeted around internally. There's a strange irony that despite the financial contribution, sometimes the marketing conversation, the internal engagement is one of the hardest things to have. What I would say is we've talked a lot about numbers, we've talked a lot about will writing, but ultimately I think this is about impact and the real difference that gifts in wills can have to the beneficiaries of all of the charities that we work for. For us here at the hospice, that's about the very kind of practical kind of context in which we find ourselves in supporting people with the last days of their lives. I think just to bust the myth around hospice care, we look after people from that point of diagnosis. So when they're living with that diagnosis, which can be for several years, themselves, their partners, their families, and we support them through our wellness kind of activities. Obviously, there is a point at which they're close to end of life and they need more kind of intense care. We would hope to do that where they would choose to do it, and most often that is at home, but others are admitted here to the inpatient unit, and we look after them well there. And thereafter, we support the family beyond that death with our bereavement services. So often what hospices are delivering is much broader than people might think. But for me, ultimately, it's about that really kind of patient-centric approach to what we do. And there's a really lovely story here. A couple of weeks ago, the team managed to organise a wedding for one of the patients in our inpatient unit, and within 24 hours the team had organised a cake, they'd found a dress, they'd got flowers, and they decorated the little outside porch of that room, and we found a celebrant, and they ran that ceremony. And for me, that's what hospice care is about. It's helping people to live those kind of final moments of their life, however long that might be, to the fullest.
Incredible story. Thank you for sharing. Lucinda, you mentioned that Remember a Charity Week is coming up. It's September. Obviously, Today's Wills and Probate are supporting. What are the plans for this year? How do you keep people engaged this year, next year, and going forward?
Remember a Charity does work all year round to reach, engage, and inspire the public with the option of leaving a gift to charity in their will. But of course, Remember a Charity Week is such a key part of our annual programme. It's that lovely opportunity for us to engage and draw together and activate all our different partners. So that means all of our charity members, including Chris and the team at Princess Alice Hospice, through to all our legal sector partners and campaign supporters. So that, of course, is just as a recap, that solicitor firms and professional will writers really are absolutely crucial in that process. And within the week-long campaign, there's a whole host of different activities and celebrity activity geared up for the week. We work closely with our member charities to equip them with the tools and resources to share their legacy message, but we also work with the legal sector to do much the same. So we provide a whole host of different resources and assets to encourage solicitors and will writers to use the opportunity of the week to engage with clients and prospects, to open up conversation about will writing and asking people to update their will perhaps, and using this as a great platform to open up those discussions. So I guess I would encourage absolutely anybody listening to, take a look at our website and find out a little bit more. We're still taking on board, still recruiting other campaign supporters to get involved this year, and we have a whole host of wonderful digital assets which we're looking forward to equipping solicitor firms and will writers with. So do get in touch, have a look at rememberacharity.org.uk, and we'd love to help you connect with more will writing clients.
Well, if there's still a dry eye in the house, then it's certainly not mine, because that story, Chris, is incredible and an example of what happens up and down the country at hospices, no doubt. But it was great to understand the actual impact that it has on people, which is obviously the reason that we give to charity. Thank you so much to you both for joining the podcast and for sharing your insight and thoughts. Thank you to Chris.
Thanks, David. It's been really good to share today the impact that the work here at Princess Alice Hospice has, but critically, more importantly, to raise awareness of the fact that without Gifts in Wills, we just wouldn't be able to do what we do.
Thank you, Lucinda.
Thanks, David. It's been a real pleasure to take part. And I just wanted to add a real thank you on a personal note and on behalf of the sector as a whole to all those listening, all those who speak with their clients about the option of leaving a gift to charity in their will. We know your role is not to be a fundraiser, but simply by making clients aware of the option, you really can make that fundamental difference between somebody thinking about leaving a gift, having it in the back of their mind, and actually taking action and making that transformative difference that can have a huge impact on charitable services now and for generations to come. Thank you.
The Today's Wills and Probate podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todayswillsandprobate.co.uk. My thanks to Lucinda and also to Chris. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Wills and Probate podcast, one of the leading sources of information for the wills and probate sector. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todayswillsandprobate.co.uk and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.